Today we're going to take a look at this Week 0 matchup between Nebraska and Northwestern, and I want to start by giving you all a brief season outlook for each of these teams, and then ultimately taking a look at the matchups on each side of the ball for this game. So let me start by saying this. Even though neither of these teams even came close to sniffing contention in the Big Ten West last season, granted Nebraska lost a lot of close games, I happen to think this is a pretty massive and consequential game for each of these teams and for the Big Ten in general. Now, it might not be up on the level of, say, Wisconsin at Ohio State, which is a game we're going to see later on this season, but we've got to remember that Pat Fitzgerald has brought this Northwestern program to the Big Ten championship game in 2 of the past 4 seasons. And when you look at the recruiting rankings from 2016 to 2020, which spans over 5 years and also spans over that time that Northwestern has made it to the Big Ten championship game twice, they've only had a top 50 class 2 times, and they've come in at number 50 and number 47 respectively. So to say the least, this is a coaching staff and a head coach that gets the most out of his players. And as for Nebraska, if they want to have the type of season that they think they can have, and really the type of season that they should have when you consider the talent on this roster, it starts in conference play against Northwestern. It starts in Week 0. So I firmly believe that each of these teams are going to be improved from last year, as Northwestern is projected to win 3.5 to 4 games. Nebraska is projected to win 7 to 7.5 games, depending on where you look. And we are going to start with Nebraska today. And Nebraska hit the transfer portal pretty hard over the past few months, addressing some premium positions like defensive line and receiver. I do love the hire of offensive coordinator Mark Whipple. I think he's ultimately going to give this offense some juice. When he was at Pitt last season, their offense was top 10 in scoring, passing, and total offense. So again, he's going to give this offense some juice. Obviously, Casey Thompson comes over from Texas. Ultimately, I think he's a more accurate passer of the football than Adrian Martinez was for Scott Frost. I think he can be a good to great QB at the college level. He can make nearly every throw you ask him to make, and he can also help out with his legs in the run game, whether he's threatening to run the ball or handing it off. We take a look at this running back room with Ramir Johnson, and I think he's a solid option, but there's also depth at this position group for Nebraska when you consider the likes of Jaquez Yant, who, averaged 6.3 yards a carry last year and even had a long run of 64 yards. My question at receiver comes with Omar Manning. Can he become that number 1 bona fide receiving option? I think he's capable of it. We just have to see if he becomes that productive this season. They do get Trey Palmer coming over from LSU. He will certainly threaten the defense and open some things up for others. And then how about Marcus Washington also coming over from Texas with Casey Thompson? He's a viable third option to me as well. So, I believe that when you consider the additions of Casey Thompson and Mark Whipple at OC and the depth at receiver with the guys that are coming back and the guys that have transferred in, this offense should be fine as a unit as a whole. And, the offensive line should be good. It doesn't have much continuity, but it isn't devoid of talent, that's for sure. I think Scott Frost has done a pretty good job of recruiting that position since he's been at Nebraska. We move over to the defense, and TCU transfer Ochuan Mathis will be a high-impact player for this team, as he did record 26 sacks in his 3 seasons at TCU. So he'll be coming off the edge along with a guy like Ty Robinson. The rest of the defensive line is full of transfers, so there's some shuffling and sorting to do out there. Linebacker should be a strength for this team as they bring back a lot of production, a lot of tackles from last year. And then when you look at the secondary, you've got a guy like Quentin Newsome, who is an up-and-comer to me. He had 4 passes defended last season. I would say the secondary is not quite as strong as the front seven, but the unit as a whole should be significantly better than it was last season, mainly because of the addition of Ochaun Mathis, adding to that pass rush. Now we move over to Northwestern, and they are right in the middle of the pack in terms of returning production on both sides of the ball. Ryan Hilinski is going to be the starter at quarterback, and although he only threw 54% in terms of completion percentage last season, I happen to think I see something with Ryan Hilinski. I happen to think that he can be a pretty good quarterback at this level. We have to remember that he was a highly touted recruit out of high school, and at this point, he's got a lot of college experience. We moved to running back with Evan Hull. I would say he's limited but serviceable. I think his best quality is his vision, particularly inside of the tackles. You've got Malik Washington, who to me is a mainstay at receiver. He's going to be their number one guy. So between Malik Washington and Evan Hull, I think this offense still needs that third playmaker. And I would look at perhaps a guy like Jacob Gill at wide receiver to eventually become that guy. The offensive line did struggle last year, and mostly the same group of guys come back. But, it has been a point of emphasis for this program over the offseason, and I think they will be a better unit as a whole this time around. I mean, it doesn't hurt that they have a projected first-rounder at left tackle in Peter Skoronski. Overall, I think the offense as a whole needs to become more explosive and be more willing to take some deep shots down the field to really be a better offense, because last year this offense was pretty abysmal. Northwestern did lose their leading tackler from last year, but they still retained some key players on that side of the ball. I want to make sure I get this name right. They've got defensive end Adetomiwa Adebawor. So he's going to be a key player in this game. And they've got some good players in the secondary as well. It seems like they always do under Pat Fitzgerald. There are many transfers along the defensive line, but they are mostly upperclassmen. So I think that unit is going to be better than people expect it to be. And then, although the cornerback duo of A.J. Hampton and Cameron Mitchell failed to record an interception last year, they did combine for 18 passes defended. So I think that's pretty stout. Bryce Gallagher comes back at linebacker, and under Pat Fitzgerald, I do just feel good about this unit in general. Well schemed, well taught, and good enough players at certain spots. Either way, to me, what is the most important unit in this game, if you will? To me, it's Casey Thompson and his receivers for Nebraska. In last year's Week 0 opener, for Scott Frost, this unit really failed him as Adrian Martinez failed to complete some passes that could have resulted in chunk plays or big-time gains for this offense. And I think that was really the difference in the game against Illinois. I do think Nebraska will have a more balanced attack this time around because of Mark Whipple as the OC. Both these teams really like to run the ball, as they had greater than 55 to 45 splits running to passing last season. So both of these coaches want to establish that ground game, but I do expect Nebraska to be a little more balanced again this time around. At the end of the day, again, the key matchup to me is Nebraska's playmakers and receivers on the perimeter versus Northwestern's stout secondary. So if that combination of units for Nebraska struggles at all, like it did last year against Illinois in the opener, this game will be uncomfortably close well into the fourth quarter. So that is going to do it for this episode, and I appreciate all of you tuning in. Check out my college football preview video that I posted, and stay tuned for more episodes, as next week we obviously get closer to week 1, and I'm going to preview many more games, both Thursday night games, Power 5 rated, between West Virginia and Pitt, and then you've also got Penn State and Purdue, and then many more games over the weekend as well. So again, thanks for listening and stay tuned.